That's what awakening feels at the beginning. And it's grounding, it's sinking into your own space and speaking and expressing from the heart. And from the heart, it's not the physical heart, it's vibrating that energy of the higher being or your own higher dimension to the world, communicating it very directly. That is the heart. This is all heart. But the way you perceive it in the body may vary. Some people say that if they feel it exactly here, but in reality, the heart of the higher self is channeled into the body from the upper centers, right? And then we get grounded again through the heart, but into the body, so that all our, you know, limbs and the periphery of the body also gets nourished, because it's not a coincidence that we express love through, trying to hug, or in terms of human context again. And the materialism, by the way, it's also, what is materialism? It's a perception of lack, again, which comes from trauma of not being balanced or enough, and trying to grab the whole process of grabbing to oneself. And it's not only physical grabbing. Materialism is not the physical matters grabbing. It's actually grabbing other people's emotions, pulling basically like a black hole everything into oneself, because we think that ego and material possessions are culprit. No, it is the whole narrative of one's own, I would say, emptiness in a negative way, emptiness which becomes like a black hole where there is no healthy identity. And in order to fill one's this negative emptiness in, we need to start grabbing other people's attention, other people's possessions, or even ideas, or what they have, or their essence, basically. That's how people try to copy other people, or take something from them, or do something that they like, because they fundamentally are not rooted within their own essence, and thus are not fulfilled. So when the heart is awakening to the essence, you stop grabbing. That's why the blessing gesture is like that. You are to the world, but you're not to the world empty-handed. You are like a fountain already fulfilled, and now you have enough, not only for yourself but for the rest. And the rest is none other but the projection of who you are and who you've always been. But like you said, it's a return. Awakening is a return. There is nothing new. It's just I've wandered too far away from who I was, from my core. It's like you go too far from your spaceship and maybe you lose even contact. So, and I think this is the process of rediscovery. And there are so many layers. It's a constant ongoing process. But as long as you're holding onto the core, the unfolding is but gradual, natural, and sort of not causing imbalance. When people try to dive into deeper layers prematurely, they create again imbalance through this desire, because why would you want something prematurely? Again, it's from inability to see the present moment of life and the joy of life now. And so then the spiritual pursuit becomes like that tool again, which we're grabbing. So we're not only, and grabbing human man-made spirituality is also materialism, although it is disguised under the name of spiritual pursuit, spiritual journey. But to know the spiritual journey is to simply be it. And most of the people, they don't experience it. It is, drug induced, or stimulated one way or the other, or the trauma is so much to the brim and the people are afraid to face themselves or to face their traumas, and it just goes, it spills over, and there is a episode of, you know, psychotic episode, imbalanced episode, drama, and that makes them feel afterwards, once they've released it, maybe as if they had some kind of supernatural awakening or experience, when in reality it was just an emotional outburst. And whenever you release that I don't know, contracted emotional states, definitely there is pause, and that pause may be confused for awakening. And a lot of people balance between these extremes and then have their natural being experienced in just glimpses, when they just like for a second or a minute just kind of withdraw within, because they're tired of being too much involved with the projection and fighting and resisting it. Silence doesn't say it's silence, because when you are really in silence, there is absolute void of a need or desire to explain, validate. There's simply no interaction with the projected reality apart from being in the body fully consciously. So the moment we try to explain anything, we need to somewhat come out. Now, the difference between the aligned being and non-aligned being is that aligned being is transmitting, broadcasting what they are at every given moment. It's natural, not forced, natural self-expression of the authentic self, because there is no thought or emotion involved in between, meaning there is no distortion in that broadcast, in that emanation. Now, the difference between people who have experiences and states and then they talk about them is very clear, because and distinct, because they are not aligned all the time. They are aligned, maybe having certain experiences, and then they come out and boast about them and try to explain them logically, try to go around and speak about it. But while they do so, that alignment is already gone. Now, when the alignment is gone, there is excitement, but no transmission. The aligned beings, which are very few, because everyone is somewhat trying at the moment, or even trying to awaken, even though they had certain experiences and considered them or thought they were awakening, but they aren't. And it applies to everything we do, to cooking, to detoxing, to doing any kinds of practice. If you're not coming out of that alignment, all of these things are but same as everything else. They have nothing to do with anything, with your core, basically, with the spiritual core, because every act becomes spiritual, no matter how materialistic it may appear, as long as you come out of the alignment. Because what is the difference between the aligned person and not? When you come from the alignment, every action is correct, because it doesn't leave afterthought, because there is no judgment or any kind of logical assumption, because it feels like the right thing to do. It's because you're in the flow. Because you're in the flow, it's just but natural creative expression, but natural action, which feels, again, relaxed. You're not coming into contraction. You're not coming into pressure. You're not coming into something that causes you more stress than benefit. Let's say in case of detoxing, in case of, pursuing certain, I don't know, diet or practice, because people do these things prematurely. And what is prematurely? Prematurely means that it is not aligned with you. It is not the natural emanation of your consciousness. You haven't aligned with that yet. You want it. It's like, I want to live on the 13th floor, but unfortunately, I haven't even started walking, or I have no means to do so, you know? So that you are what you have. And so when you are what you have, or you have what you are, there is no materialism, spiritualism. There is just pure being in the flow, natural existence, which is both material and spiritual, as long as we're in the body. But when there is a desire, forceful action, and no alignment within, and it doesn't come from there, it creates this agony. And even if you can get something, you can pursue something, it becomes so forceful. You need to apply so much more energy, mental, emotional, because you're not in the flow. That's why you need to use the lower levels of energy, which is mental, emotional, to get somewhere where the being who is aligned can get in a second. And so both can get to the same goal, but the way it's going to feel and appear, even outside, will be different, because the being in alignment doesn't feel exhausted, doesn't look exhausted, doesn't claim anything. They're already there because this is how they want it to be, but in a selfless way. And selfless means it's just natural for them to have it. But a being who still comes from trauma and misalignment and any kind of imbalance, they want it because it will define them, because that will give them a sense of power for a moment. It will give them a sense of, I am something, because I'm still not that. So I need to hide behind some kind of material objects, relationships, I don't know, something that I supposedly create out of myself. But then there is a strong identification. And when there is a strong identification, there is still a strong fear of loss of that identification. That's why that fear of loss propels one to get attached to what one has, rather than to be and use and then just be in a detached manner, then in a selfless way. So selfish and selfless have very, very fine line in between, because you may enjoy the same things, but how you got them, how you are perceiving them, and how you identifying or not identifying with them matters. Because a selfish being feels that everything he or she has is the extension of their identity. But the selfless being, an extension meaning it defines their identity. But the selfless being perceives it's an extension, but in a selfless, detached, kind of not unbothered way, because they are already rooted, and this is but a natural level of their manifestation of who they are, that frequency that they feel that they deserve, or who they are, that reflection of their spiritual intelligence. A selfish being is not spiritually intelligent, not even sometimes aware or able to self-reflect. And so, because of this blind spot, they feel that everything defines them, or they see everything as a definition, as a way to validate themselves. And unfortunately, that cannot validate truly their core. And so they remain in this pursuit forever. And that's how it keeps on draining them. So, because there is a spiritually wealthy being who will also be materially abundant, or have things that are enough for them or needed. But then there will be only materially abundant being who will have deep hollowness within them, or emptiness, which will only need to be filled with material things until they wake up and realize that these things cannot satiate my lack inside, or the lack of the connection of me with my spiritual core or whatever essence. And so then in that case, a wealthy being who is only having that material wealth will start probably pursuing also uh, something spiritual. But the thing is that most of these people cannot recognize what spiritual core is, because they will still glide along the surface and fall for different things, meaning ideologies, beliefs, someone's teachings, without much core. Because once we are not in contact with our core, there is very little chance to recognize the essence in any teaching or anyone. And so they will most probably glide along the spiritual surface, going from teacher to teacher, searching, but unfortunately might not find.
Yeah.
Because there is no self-reflection. So if we really want to understand what the spiritual teaching is, or dive into the essence and actually reconnect with ourselves, we need to develop self-reflection and observation first. And only then we will start diving into ourselves. And once we touched the surface of the core, we will be able to see through the spiritual market and tell the weeds from the wheat, and also be able to maybe come across a gem. Because if you don't know what the real gem looks like and have no skills to identify it, it might as well appear as a rock, as a simple rock.
Yeah.
Everyone wants the most mysterious teachings, the most advanced teachings, but they again fail to see, or blind to the fact that you can't bite more than you can chew. And the frequency of your own soul defines the pace of your spiritual journey or the advancement. It is not what your ego wants. You want the most spiritual teacher. Are you ready for that spiritual teacher? Are you ready for that frequency? Can you match in frequency? Because in order to meet an advanced Siddha, an advanced teacher, an advanced spiritual master, who might not appear the way you expect or your limited self does, you need to match that frequency, at least on some level, so that you can meet in the same unified field, that you can have access through that even 1% within you to connect to that more advanced field. And people don't see it. They just want to feed themselves or their limited selves that emptiness, as I mentioned, with new techniques, new exercises. And the techniques and exercises by themselves have no much meaning unless they are empowered, unless you are aligned with that technique, with that vibrational sound that you're trying to utter or practice, like mantras or some kind of practices. And do you even need them if you're not awakened? People pursue these things from a completely ignorant state of consciousness, where they're driven by the desire, which is coming from the limited self. They're not aligned. In order to meet a master, you are to be somewhere, having something there to connect. And if you connect with the master, but you're not that, the disconnection will be very fast and the push to periphery even faster, because we cannot connect to something that we're actually not. We may try. It's like everyone can connect, everyone can taste. All the insects fly to the light, but many of them die. And the same applies to all this ambition, spiritual ambition, desires to connect you cannot connect before you recognize. And first you recognize it within you because you've done the groundwork of self-reflection, observation, and actually constructive admission to yourself of all your imbalances and extremes and traumas. And you actually made some effort to refine, then your core starts shining through a little bit more and allows you to bathe in that. And sooner or later, you will be maybe given a chance to see something beyond your previous experiences. The question is, can you stay with that frequency? And even more serious question is, can you advance and grow with it? Because everyone can taste, connect. To stay and to grow is the hardest, because higher frequency is the frequency of higher consciousness and the truth. You cannot lie to the truth. You cannot hide. You cannot, avoid, because that will reflect exactly who you are, and you might not like it. And when you do not want to see it, you will not be able to continue the journey. And that's the destiny of the majority of people. Even if once in a lifetime they're given a chance to connect to something higher than them, usually they fall back into their limited self, because that higher connection empowered them for the moment, gave them power, and that power blinded them. That's why there is a old teaching: give people power, test people through power. But the higher power itself teaches. It's their own higher self that teaches them, either through someone within the projection or through life itself, different kind of circumstances, to show them that they are not ready, to show that they have to work on things that they refuse to work, because their egos desire, they have ambition to pursue the most advanced, the newest, the greatest, as they think today. But they want it because they're still in tune with the limited self, with that whatever you call unhealthy ego, rather than with their higher identity. The point is, we do not need to destroy any identity. We need to return to the higher identity and operate through that, and observe all the things that are to be refined through that. If we cannot do this, our journey is a constant loop which returns us to the same point, to the same issue, and yet we remain blind until we wake up and we resolve it. Then the journey is free to go further, or opens up further, and we can proceed. And so it goes. Now, the more you align with a higher self, the more you are in a surrendered state. And surrendered state meaning your body is relaxed, your mind is in tune with higher consciousness. So there is no error anymore. Then the journey becomes a straight line where there is no obstacle, very fast and intense, and very few people can align with it and join you on your journey or proceed with that pace, with that intensity, and that far. People imagine the journey to be linear, but then in that case, it's the difference between the journey is like on two rails. You have to have two rails to move. Then you shift to a monorail, and then you don't need a rail at all. Then you fly. But for all of this to happen, you need to cultivate only one thing: openness to creation, which is the highest teacher, life itself, embracing the joy of life, being rooted within, and staying in that flow, which means in the surrendered state. In other words, in the state of complete trust And to life from within, not to life which is circumstantial or appearing in glimpses wherever your senses look at or whatever they hear or listen to or touch. Life is that vibration, that pulsation. We awaken to our life from within. What is that life? It's that, I don't know how would I put it best way not to mislead, but it's that bioenergetic substance. It's that pulsation, that light body activation means that you are awakened to the subtler dimensions of self, which is more vibration on a subtler level. Of course, the body is vibration too, but it's somewhat appearing more solid to us, solid because we are kind of, because we're too much in tune with the body at the moment. So whatever you are in tune is start appearing solid, meaning because the conscious focus and energy is flowing more into that dimension. During the dream state, that appears somewhat solid, right? And so on and so forth. But in reality, everything is fluid. And that's what we learn through awakening, to be flexible between different states and unify them in terms of awareness, where awareness starts penetrating through all of these states and you do not lose your awareness, whether you are in a dream or in this awakened or you are in a blissful state. That's how you can maintain that alignment and also be relaxed, because now you have access to the energy which you only have access to during the deep sleep phase. Now you bring the deep sleep phase into the awakened state and align them. Now you are in bliss. But now you are able also to move in that state. Now the quality of life changes and you feel joyful all the time. Now you feel pulsation of life throughout your cells, throughout your nerves, channels, whatever. Doesn't matter. We don't need to always look at ourselves in a dispersed way. Rather, better to just be that pulsation of life, emanation of life, transmission of life, broadcasting of life. But if you are focused on emotional dimension or mental dimension only, or you just jump between them, that's a residue. Then you limit your scope of emanation to the emotional level only. Now you become an emanation of toxic, sometimes, emotions, or even positive, but that's again another extreme. Or you become an emanation of some kind of a mental dimension or intellectual ideas. But that is not the reality. That is a man-made reality. That's a human context. That is residue that's supposed to be dissolved through this alignment. So again, when you are truly emanating, is because that residue, all these other layers, they're dissolved. And you only can use them in that pure state. You just know. You know not because you've read, not because you've accumulated information or someone told you, but because now it's the inner knowing. You connect to knowledge rather than you absorb it from the external reality. Because knowledge itself is always some kind of a vibrational level of being. And so it's a completely different understanding of what knowledge is or what spiritual knowledge would be. Because you don't need to again to grab and possess it. It's already there in the cloud. That's why we call it records, Akashic. What is Akashic? In the ether, that is already there. It's already existence. The fact that you know it doesn't make you superior, because there's no identity when you have access to this type of knowledge, because you've already dissolved it. You're not superior. But because you're humble, you have access to it. By connecting, it's not yours. You're not trying to grab it. You just know. And that even desire to know is dissolved. You just know, you express, and you let it go. There is nothing that can Remain within your space of consciousness. Neither knowledge, no mystery, no desire, no nothing. If you need something, you do it. You pursue it momentarily, but without residue, without afterthought, without having any explanation of what's the role of you as a limited self or an identity in that process. And then you may say that you are purified to a degree, but there is always more to polish, more to refine, more to let go. So the journey unfolds, but it's not actually the journey. It's like the opening. The more you stay open, the more you get filled with that which you don't even need or want. But because you're open, you cannot miss the sunlight, the rays that are coming down. It's but impossible because by default, whenever you're open, you get filled. But when we try to grab in a limited sense, we always miss, and there is always a sense of failure because it's never enough. When you're fulfilled by simply staying open, because what is again Shaktipat? It's a grace. It's a grace of your own being and ability to be connected through that higher being with the entire creation. Now, would creation bestow anything upon you? Wouldn't abundant creation give all the knowledge? That is Shaktipat. That is the grace of that which is eternal, pulsating, abundant creation. And that's all that Siddha teachings are all about, or any spiritual teachings. We don't even need to define the teachings of the immortals, because they've reconnected with the immortal sense of self or essence. Mm-hmm. They knew, they had insights, abilities, not because they wanted. The aligned being, I repeat myself all the time, but the aligned being does not want to teach, does not want to heal. It just naturally flows out of them. Not because they assumed any position from within. They cannot assume position because when you're open, you're fluid, you're flowing, you're always acquiring new and letting it go. And that's how you grow. And you don't grow in a linear way, up, down, again. It's all beyond any human context. Growth is like expansion, but even that would not define the truth of it. It's more and more refinement of all the layers where you become a potent, minute particle, but of such potency that you can explode the whole universe.